Today we want to give you a glimpse into the future. And imagine the national parks 10 years hence. Here's the picture. In the coming decade, it has again become an American aspiration for families to experience the national parks. Increasingly, families are scheduling day trips, getaways, and extended vacations to national parks for adventures, experiential learning, and restoration. These families better reflect our national composition, with greater numbers of Latinos, Blacks, Asians, Native Americans, and whites enjoying park experiences. Lesser known, as well as well-known national parks are growing in consideration compared to the other highly desired travel destination within the United States. And it's not just by Americans. Long appreciated for their scenic, cultural, historic qualities, America's national parks have now become known as one of the world's premier adventure travel destinations. You know, there's a reason why I'm having trouble reading. I just realized I don't have these on. Now you're not clear, but this is. National parks.
About 10 years from now, John.
Yes, this is 10 years. I should put this on. National parks are visible in ways they weren't 10 years before. National and international advertising campaigns inform the public about the diversely gratifying and stimulating experiences to be found within the parks. National parks are seen on feature programs here and abroad, and the public engages in online conversations about park experiences they have done and plan to do. Children learn about the parks at school and take field trips with their families to nearby parks. Advertisers seek partnerships that support the parks and align their products and services with park values and experiences. In part, because of how parks are promoted 10 years hence, the visitation pattern called Look and Leave has been replaced with Immerse and Stay. Rangers, guides, and outfitters based in the parks and in gateway communities provide enticing, sustainable, and unexpected ways of experiencing the parks in deeper and more meaningful ways. National park interpretation has experienced a rebirth as technology provides a deeper connection between the park visitor and park values. New types of accommodation are appearing in and near the parks. These facilities sit lightly on the land, are built using sustainable materials, and have amenities that better fit how people want to visit the parks, yet they are still in keeping with the traditional character of national park lodging. Time-worn accommodations are being replaced with lodging that better fits public expectations. These fresh accommodations were designed with how people live today and with materials that create a new park lodging ethic, as distinctive and remarkable to parks as were these first national park lodges. Food services inside and surrounding the parks are national models of, and now of the venerable term, and it is venerable 10 years hence, healthy eating in healthy parks is embodied by the quality, taste, value, and nutrition that are now accepted hallmarks of food service in and surrounding the national parks. I said surrounding, too. National park restaurants often win kudos and awards for their culinary innovations. They are perceived by the public as being culinary destinations. Transportation to and within the parks is changing as well. Low-impact, multimodal methods of transporting park visitors have more than gained acceptance. They have become preferred for their convenience, modernity, sustainability, and affordability. Innovative forms of transportation are taking park visitors to and through the parks. The technology gap that existed in the early 2000s is now a distant memory. Mobile communications are the norm and an expectation wherever people travel. There is little difference to be found in the parks. Coverage is as good in developed areas of parks as in urban areas, though it's become a social custom in parks, as in theaters, to put technology aside temporarily for an undisturbed park experience. Technology companies have helped communicate this social norm. Park people, all who work within or near the national parks, and I say all who work within and near the national parks, are now park people. They're both public and private. They see themselves as one team, heading in one direction. the preservation and promotion of the park's natural, cultural, and historic resources in ways that provides for exceptional and valued services and experiences. And National Park promotion has contributed to this change. And so I have with us today, as was so introduced by Bruce, people from the future who we brought back in time to today to tell us how.
10 years ago.
You notice how lovely they are. Imagine how much more beautiful they were 10 years ago. I'm going to start off.
I'd say you're finished. I'd say you're toast.
With the U.S. Department of the Interior and ask Gail, what happened to again make it an American aspiration for families to experience the national parks?
Well, I think one of the things that happened is that the idea of visiting a national park was actually became a reality because it appeared as if it was within reach, their immediate reach, because of course we know that there are people who live all across the country who, when we think of national parks, we think of places like the Grand Canyon, Yosemite, but those families also were introduced to the parks that were closest to them, and that they also understood that there were other resources to introduce them to the larger national parks. The National Park Service has many national park units all over the country that are small, they're cultural and historical in nature, and those families were introduced to those, and we opened our arms and reminded them that we have something for everyone.
That's great. Other comments? Other things you've seen?
I think we're good to start with, yeah.
Okay, good.
My future brain is still
That's coming back from the future. It's tough. I know. But I want to ask Diane, in what ways did market research contribute to these kinds of changes I just described?
Well, the good news is that research still holds value the way it did yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And in the world of engaging with people and understanding consumers and travel behaviors and desires and values, research is the foundation that lays out everything. Research is knowledge. It provides information to guide us. In our marketing strategies today, research, I often say that research is to marketing what location is to real estate. It's very, very important. Without it, you have a very, gunshot approach. And so, as we would move into the future and looking back for where we've been, the partnerships among the Park Service, the gateway communities, the DMOs, have all decided to coordinate and consolidate research initiatives, much like a program that we're running this summer in Wyoming. These are examples of what can happen going forward, but this summer we ran a very comprehensive research study in Yellowstone National Park. It was done with the approval of the superintendent, and he's very much involved in the kind of questions that have been asked, but it was funded by the Wyoming Office of Tourism, by Xanterra, Grand Teton Lodge Company, and the two gateway communities, Teton County Lodging Tax Board and the Park County Lodging Tax Board, which represent obviously Jackson Hole and Cody, Wyoming. And the information that will come from this study will provide a great resource of knowledge to all of us. To the Park Service, certainly about the values that the visitors have enjoyed, the things that, for us as marketers, the things that have motivated the travel, how we can expand on shoulder seasons. And what's been enlightening in this first wave of results is that there is a much greater value for visitation to the park than what our statewide or national research has shown us. And so through intercept studies and online studies, really getting down into visiting with thousands of respondents, it's been amazing. In fact, our efforts on international visitation have jumped as high as 27% in September of all park visitors into Yellowstone in September, which really tells us about the changing reflection. I think, research will continue to reinforce what we have as our gut feelings about people and parks and visitation. Does that mean, does that the sound like at the Academy Awards when the music starts and it's time to be done? I wish I was at the Academy Awards. And so, the value of research will only be enhanced and more necessary as we go forward. But I do believe, based on examples that we've had and used before, it really will be a stronghold for how we shape the future. And certainly when we look at the value of the parks and working with other partners, our research will be a guiding force.
That's great. You know, Leigh, and part of the communication that you mentioned before we started this, you've seen is that internet, TV, and feature film production about parks has changed dramatically in the coming 10 years. What did it take to get national parks seen on the internet, TV, and in feature films here and abroad?
Well, looking.
Technology.
Is this one? Okay.
Technology.
This is 10 years back technology. It doesn't work as well as yours.
Well, first I'd go back 10 years to when we started with very little money in our state and said, how can we jumpstart the visual understanding of what Utah is? And nobody did better than John Ford and the John Wayne movies. And certainly with the international community, movies were getting to Europe a lot faster. And instead of a movie getting to Europe in a year or two after it was released, movies were starting to be released simultaneously. So we started to build partnerships with various entities. This last 10 years ago, when John Carter came out, speaking in the past, we had a partnership with Delta Airlines and Disney and us. And we had a 60-second commercial that we paid $1,500 for in a contest with people in Utah to create a 60-second commercial that we could show. Disney loved it. They put it on every screen in London when John Carter opened with a 60-second feature, and then they took additional asset video that we had shot of our national parks and did a Utah is Epic 2.5-minute preview before the trailers for John Carter. So we had 100 million impressions for $1,500, as it were, in the first 3 weeks of the opening of that movie. We continue to use the visual because they have the money, and they are the directors of photography that can shoot it more beautifully than sometimes we can afford. So then you saw DVDs come online. And many states were giving incentives to attract the economic development of filming to their area. And we said, well, you can't just have our money for free. We want, on every film, shot on location in Utah. And we want it displayed prominently. And when you release the DVD, we want a shot on location Utah promo included with that DVD. And so you see the DVDs going around the world, and then the internet came on. And we said, let's see how we can get involved with the internet as well. We actually used, and we had to be careful because when you went to YouTube and the internet, you had to make certain what the rights were. But in the early days with trade shows, we did a signature reel of all the movies that had been shot in Utah, and there was a title underneath so they knew exactly what they were seeing. And then we gave videos and said, come and see this movie and where it was shot. We did film in Utah or Wyoming or other state brochures and created fan tours that told people where they were seeing where the movie was shot. We also worked out the permitting problems with the national parks and our public lands.
You mean there are none in the future?
We're thinking there are none in the future. There's consistency between the parks.
Wow.
And we're able to get commercial production turned around a lot quicker because we've lost a lot of big commercials in this country because they go from concept to air date in less than the old permitting regulations. And we took a look at the permitting that was in existence 10 years ago, which was created to protect the resources when the motion picture industry came on those resources, and said, now the footprint, because the technology is so much different, that a handheld camera can give you as good a shot as what used to roll up in trucks to the degree of 300 people and was a concern about how it affected the assets, to really how we want to capitalize on it. And one of the things that we addressed in the 10 years was people who were doing extreme sports and wanting to get the next biggest thing on YouTube, which maybe our park rangers didn't want to see, and certainly didn't want to encourage. So we worked together with the public, we worked together with the national parks people, and we said, look, rather than look at permitting these projects to protect the resources, that should be in place. But let's permit them to benefit from them for our own use, so that it's truly a partnership when you go out and you see filming.
You know, I've heard that New Zealand came to see Utah and Wyoming and Arizona to find out how you've taken so much film production away from them. So it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Gail, park visitation among families now better reflects our national composition. I stated earlier in my introductory remarks that with greater numbers of Latinos, Blacks, Asians, Native Americans, and whites enjoying the park experiences, how did this happen? What made that change in just 10 years?
Well, looking back, some of the things that happened over the course of the 10 years to bring us to that point was that in a lot of the places where there were influences from communities of color, but those stories were rarely known or rarely told, they became more prominent. And the Park Service, along with its partners, the state tourism offices and local governments, county governments, they all came together to look at the stories that connected all peoples, all communities to those places. And those stories began to bubble up and rise up, and they began to be told a lot more. And again, that also signaled to these families that we were welcoming and we were inviting, and that we had something for them to connect to. And so with that, we also used the things that we learned from our youth, all of our youth, to encourage them to drag their parents and their grandparents along. And then we realized that for some communities, the way that they experience recreation, the way that they travel, and the way that they tour, and the way that they do things in the park was a lot different than what we had been accustomed to. And we made those adjustments, and we welcomed everyone, and then we told their stories, and we helped them to connect. And we also encouraged them to go back and tell others, and invite others to come.
Was there more advertising and outreach?
Definitely more of the A word, more of the M word marketing, you know, definitely more of those, but doing it in a way that was relevant to the communities we were trying to reach. We realized that not everyone gets their information from one single source, so we began to expand and look at all of the resources that we had to touch these families, whether it was radio, internet, television, specialized ways that people get their information. For instance, we know that the Vietnamese community, they have their own news resources and their own ways of getting information, and we adapted what we did and reached out to those specific outlets and used and communicated the values of those communities in order to draw in those communities. And so we changed a lot, and we encouraged and invited others in, and then we asked them to go out and we made disciples and said, bring some more when you come back.
That's fantastic.
John?
Yes. Yeah, please.
One of the things in looking back at 10 years of collateral materials is we made a concerted effort to see diversity in the actual collateral materials. See the different faces, the colors. And in a state that hasn't been known for diversity, we're having a tremendous success in business, and business is bringing diversity. So we are going to those businesses and saying, we would like to reach out. Here's what you can do in Utah. Let these people know who are coming in from India and China and Black Americans what is available in Utah. And we're trying to do business, outdoor recreation ad crossovers to show diversity, not only to people who might think recruitment will be a problem for their business, for diversity, but also, I want to see my own face. Anybody who picks up their high school yearbook 20 years later, who's the first picture you look for? You look for your own. And we weren't doing a good enough job in showing those faces.
And that's happened in Wyoming, in Utah, and across the country, the entire national park system. You know, promotion, advertising, was so much a part of this, as Gail just said. Diane, can you describe the kind of national and international advertising campaigns that have been conducted in the past decade, built upon the great start that we had with Gray, back in, what was it, 2012? Yeah. Describe for the audience here about how it informed the public about gratifying and stimulating experiences to be found in the parks.
Well, the good news is national parks are timeless. So they hold value across the spectrum of time. And certainly in my own state of Wyoming, Yellowstone has long been a key source of visitation for travelers from across the United States and all around the world. And people around the world take ownership of that park. I mean, it was evident after the fires of 1988 when the Office of Tourism and the then park superintendent did a tour through Europe that the Europeans really felt an ownership to that park and wanted to be assured that Yellowstone was still available for visitation. But the great thing about marketing is you get to take the very best of a product and put it out there for everyone else to see. And national campaigns, just like in 2012 and going forward, really do for states like Wyoming and a lot of us here in the West who don't have a big city destination. Our parks are our destination drivers. And everything in marketing is tied to that emotional connection to the park. So when you see a Wyoming ad in the brand of Forever West, you're going to see right now in 2012 there was a campaign running that was roam free, but prominently featuring the elements of our national parks and some of our national icons in the state of Wyoming, but also just the values that resonate for residents and visitors in big wide open spaces, beautiful scenery, starry nights, friendly people, wildlife that you would not normally see. States throughout the West, such as Utah, Life Elevated, prominently feature the national parks. And the good news is those hold the test of time. They hold water over time. It's also interesting to note that when you think of the United States and you think of it as a big country and the destinations, there are some very prominent big city destinations. And within those big cities, there are connections to national parks. Certainly big cities serve as gateways for bringing in international visitors. But outside of, a Las Vegas and New York, Orlando, the Disneys, there's all the rest of the United States, which is about, I guess, another 80%, 85 to 90% of destinations. And those are beyond the gateway destinations. And many of those encompass public lands or public areas, whether it's an urban park or a park that you would find here, like the Grand Canyon and this beautiful vista. So the good news was, in the past, in 2010, there was a program that was passed by our government, signed into law by President Obama, called the Travel Promotion Act. And through that Travel Promotion Act was the creation of an organization called Brand USA, actually the Corporation for Travel Promotion, but doing business as Brand USA. And as we look forward, we will know that this was reauthorized, it was fully funded to the maximum potential that the law would allow, that we had partners engaged in the Brand USA efforts. But looking at the 2011 and 2012 results, I just want to share with you, this is what we started with back then 10 years ago and are building on today and going into tomorrow. In August of this year, the Department of Commerce, Office of Travel and Tourism Industries, estimated that there was $82.2 billion spent on U.S. travel and tourism-related goods and services by international visitors. That was an increase of 11% over that same period in 2010. And by the year end, OTTI report estimates that international visitors could end up injecting a record $169 billion into the U.S. economy. The metrics for the first phase of the Brand USA campaign shows that these figures are likely to continue trending upward. Intent to visit has increased significantly in Brand USA's consumer launch markets within just 3 months since the campaign launched in May of 2012. Up 13 points in Canada, up 17 points in the UK, and up 11 points in Japan. And the good news about the product that we're all interested in today, our national parks and these outdoor spaces, is that in surveys, when respondents in Japan were asked what they felt about their connection to the United States, and it was 70% of them said it makes me want to travel to the United States. And they found that the United States was adventurous and energetic. And those are things that really mark to and marry up with the values of the national park system. In Canada, 82% of the survey respondents said they are considering visiting even more places in the United States after the advertising campaign ran. And found themselves, 75% found this to be a great place to unwind and relax. And the good news is it's even better in the United Kingdom, with survey respondents describing the United States as worth paying more for than any other international travel destination. 61% of the respondents said they were willing to pay more. And so this is an example, I think, and a result of marketing does work. When you send the message out and you invite people to engage in a product, an activity, and an experience, if it is properly aligned with research that guides you how you should strategically place your message, how the message, the creative should be crafted, you're going into the markets where you can have the greatest area of return, it will work. And in 2022, we're sitting today, we've seen the results of this. Just for those of you who may not be as familiar with the work that Brand USA has done on the advertising campaigns, there are 4 brand pillars. And one of those was the great outdoors. And within the great outdoors were many of our national icons of national parks, but also a way in which to introduce our lesser known parks and public lands. And so with this effort, a public-private partnership with the United States government, the people sitting in this room, and destinations and private businesses across the United States, we've been able to see an elevation in our brand and in our visitation and in increased visitation to the parks with an understanding of the great resource that they are.
That's incredible.
May I add one thing too? I think looking back and forward, the centennial for the National Park Service, the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, all of these present awesome opportunities for Brand USA. That's a marketing thing. We can connect all of those things and package them and use them and market those abroad. And that would bring even more visitors in, because most of the countries that Diane mentioned, they have a direct connection to our history in terms of the Civil War. The UK, the Slavery Museum is in the UK. Brazil. So all of the countries where the marketing is going on, we already have those products, those ready-made products, and we have these milestones that are coming up for our own country, but they definitely connect to these countries and within the United States. And I think that this is a wonderful, wonderful time to kind of tee up all of that and let it culminate with the centennial.
Now, one other thing, if I might add to this too, John, is that you know, there's a love affair with the United States, and with the work that Brand USA has been doing is to essentially rekindle that love affair. But it's long been known that you know, people, especially Europeans, have a great interest in American history. And the parks are such a part, the development of the parks are such a part of our American history. And so I think that we'll always have that resonation with those markets. The job that we all must continue to do is to make it relevant for people of other nationalities and other countries that are emerging markets, such as the Chinese market and the South American markets. And it's good news because in addition to the marketing efforts, I forgot to mention this, the United States government is doing their part to help increase the facilitation of travel to the United States. And so there's been a lot of work that's been done, I think, significantly in the last 2 years. And certainly we're seeing a lot of good news coming out of Homeland Security and with visa processing, increasing the capacity to process these visas, and also decreasing the wait times. And through these efforts, as we continue to go forward, we're only going to see more opportunities to invite our guests from around the world to the United States and to the places that we hold dear, such as our national parks.
Something you said earlier about adventurous and experiential made me think that America's national parks in the future have become known worldwide as the premier adventure travel destination. And how did that happen, Leigh?
Well, I think I would first turn to research, like Diane spoke about. We did different research and said, you know, not to take anything away from bus tours, but people of an older age were no longer content to just ride in a bus and look. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s were healthy enough that they wanted to know what they could do. I think we needed, again, getting back to the visual, we showed the smiling faces of the Chinese enjoying the adventure, not just the American face. We showed the smiling face of the Indian, Native American and India. And we looked at the empty nesters, and they helped our shoulder seasons because they were able to spend more time, not just go point to point within a certain amount of time. And then I think we were creative in getting into the culinary tourism thing. We looked at the gateway communities and we said, experientially, how can we keep these people here longer? And we got some cooking of local foods in national parks, in Capitol Reef. We have a portable stone pizza oven that 2 young girls pull into Capitol Reef Campground. They put signs around the community. They use local food only. And we found, again with research, that if you put tourbilles out in front of a farmer's market in the gateway community, the French will love you for it. They'll buy locally, they'll stay longer, and be a lot more, shall we say, hesitant to just drive on down the road and see the next look and leave. So I think it was a combination of looking at the niche markets, what were different ages, and the other thing is I think we needed to get with the Department of Health on a federal level. Certainly they are the big animal in the room with funding, and we needed to have their help to encourage people from the health side of the equation. Get out, take an adventure. Studies show people quit health programs more out of boredom than they do out of excitement and having fun. And there are a lot of different ways to stay healthy. So we pitched it visually, we pitched it through different niche markets, and applications, YouTube, all of it played into it.
You know, I found that I got bored with my diet before every meal here at North Rim. So,
you know, we're going to be bored when we go home with our diet.
all right. Those were wonderful responses. Now, I have 22 questions here, but I wanted to open it up to a couple more queries that we have. And so we have a couple of questioners, additional questions from the audience and from a panel here. So should I pass that to Derek, and how are we doing over time?
You can, Bruce, you want to introduce the responders?
Yeah. The responders.
Okay, our first responders is Bill Stokely, who's president of Stokely Hospitality Enterprises, based in Silverville, Tennessee. Stokely Hospitality is a holding company for its restaurants and lodging properties. He's got a great lodge inside of the Great Smokies National Park. Bill's very active throughout the entire state of Tennessee. I spoke to him, I can tell he's a big volunteer football fan. He's very active within the community, and he's a real sportsman and outdoors person. The other respondent, and I think she's been introduced as Alexa. If she could come up. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So.
Okay. Bill.
I'm taking notes on you ladies because you all are giving me some great ideas. One of the things that I was listening to, we talked about the makeup of the changing dynamics of the people that are coming to the parks today. And one thing we haven't heard is single families, single parent households, and how we market to them. And it's becoming more and more of a trend, and unfortunately, but it is a trend in this country. I don't know how some of you all have addressed that in your states and how you market to them. And there's both male and female aspects of that.
Well, one of the things that we do is we happen to have a very, very adventuresome single father on our staff who has 2 boys, 7 and 9. And I underwrite, when he appears, I should say, around the state officially on our behalf, a trip for him to take and experience it. He also just gets out and loves. So we gave him the option to blog and create a single parent blog. What to do as a single parent in this park, in that, in this area and that. And we encouraged it through social media. And him putting pictures on, our Facebook page and tweeting different things. Here are my sons and I, And he just did a hike in the mountains, just the Wasatch Mountains, 30 minutes from downtown Salt Lake City. And they had a picture of his son in front of, Blanche Lake at 10,000 feet, smiling his head off because he made this hike up. So I think it's the experiential, it's the testimonial of people. How do you get the testimonials out there of people who've actually done things? We're trying to use all the technology that we can to push the testimonial. And single parents, absolutely, very, very important. How can I do it? How can I take my children? Is it going to be too much? Are they going to be bored? And that's how we're pushing the message.
Looking at it from a different perspective and taking into account what we're trying to accomplish through the National Tourism Strategy, I think it's important, I was a single mom raising 2 sons, and one of the things that we always have to keep in mind that for single parents is it's not just about money, but it's also about the time. And I think we have so many assets, and our national parks are really like the hook. I see it as the hook. And then we have other public lands that offer, recreational value and everything, BLM lands, BOR lands, Corps of Engineers. And so there's a multiplicity of assets that are out there using our national parks as the hook. But the great thing about national parks is that they're everywhere, in every single state, some type, some form. And so in some states where we may not have a Yosemite or a Yellowstone, we may have little Jean Lafitte, that's, in Louisiana, but we also have those national park units that address, the culture and the history of the country. And again, remembering that we have those assets as that gateway into the bigger scope. And so, I think in terms of single parent families, in terms of communities of color, I think that is a very rich resource that we have to introduce the notion, because sometimes it can be overwhelming for people when they think about going to a national park that's, my God, that's huge, it's expensive, it's far, and it's all of these things. And so I think we have to do a better job of telling the story of everything that we have, and then using that as the entree to the larger thing, and creating that appetite within people to want to see more, to want to experience more. So I think it's really kind of looking at the entire menu of what we have in terms of the assets to offer.
And just a couple of quick things I want to add from the information that we got on the study we did this summer is only 1/3 of the respondents were the traditional family. So, it's only taking 30%, essentially 30 to 33%. But 75% of these visitors were 55 years old or younger. And so they're still, the prime age of families, but yet only 1/3 of them are traditional travelers. And then when we dug deeper down into it, 40% reported traveling with someone under the age of 18, but not someone that lived at their home. So this really does tell us that the American family is very different than what it looked like, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Ozzie and Harriet and, the Waltons and all of those folks are gone. But we, as marketers, that's why the research is so important to us, because we have to be able to speak and have a message that resonates with this traveling public. And so, no, go ahead.
Just one other thing too is I think we discussed, we have to look at how the campgrounds are set up. They were originally set up for a very private experience all the way down the line. You didn't want to see your neighbor, you didn't want to be bothered by your neighbor. Different minority groups travel differently. They like to relate to each other. They like to be able to program and play with each other. And I think, Diane and I always be grateful for the Condor presentation we saw. Get with the education people. What are your schools teaching? We make national parks posters available to all of our elementary schools. We have what we call kids postcards, which are actual postcards about all of our national parks, and start from the children and get them excited that way.
A huge change has occurred in this 10 years in the fact that, and I think you hinted on it, Gail, was that lesser parks, lesser known parks, not lesser parks, but lesser known parks, are much better known today and more visited. How did that change occur?
Well, the change occurred, again, I think, looking back over the past 10 years, we really looked, the National Tourism Strategy really provides that framework for that to be accomplished. And again, we looked across all of our resources, and we began to introduce people to those lesser known parks that offer, you know, just as great a value in terms of the experience. But saying if you like, you know, if you like Grand Canyon, then wow, you really like this place over here. And while you're there, even though that's a national park, did you know that the county has this park? And it's very similar to what you're interested in, so why don't you go and take a look at that as well? Because the goal is really to get them into these communities, to get people to stay longer. When they stay longer, they're going to have, they need to have places to stay, they have to eat. And so thinking about it in those terms and realizing that just because something is lesser known doesn't mean that it offers less value and a lesser quality of experience, but being able to really showcase that and highlight those places and using that, because people do have so many different desires and wants and what they're looking for, and not just always going to the regular go-tos, and being able to offer those other parks and those other assets to them.
Then, you know, tying into what Gail has just said, the thing that's so important is the connection of gateways. So if you're talking about a long-haul market or an international market, you know, we in Wyoming consider Chicago a gateway because many people are coming into the United States and they're landing in Chicago, and then maybe they're flying into Denver or Jackson or wherever to get into the region, but nonetheless they may be coming into the United States through a gateway community. Or if they're driving, which about 90% of all visitors to Wyoming are coming via some kind of car. They may have arrived somewhere by an airplane, but then they're getting in a motorhome or renting a car. And the importance of partnerships are making that route and that itinerary so valuable. So if you are, you know, coming from the Midwest and you're traveling west to visit one of our western parks, you know, why not stop and if you're interested in history, Fort Laramie, a National Historic Site, has a great story for the movement of the American West. And there's a tie-in all the way across the state of Wyoming. Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Park may be your ultimate destination, but you certainly can enjoy these other great things to see and do along the way. If someone's flying into Salt Lake, that's why our partnership is so important between Utah and Wyoming. Salt Lake is a gateway to our state and delivering many, many visitors. And so to be able to tie in with elements from the minute the customer arrives in a destination and fulfilling them with ideas and planting those seeds is important. And I just can't stress enough, you know, the value of partnerships and elevating, using the hooks, you know, as always you would do in your marketing. That's your hook, but you reel them in then with the hook and you show them all the other snippets along the way.
And to add one other thing that we've done over the past 10 years, bringing us to 2022, is that we also incorporated the communities, and we made them our ambassadors, and they help to tell the stories. If someone stops at a gas station and they're lost, and they're, you know, like, can you help me? And educating that business owner along the way about all of the resources and the assets that we have or they have in their area, because they can be awesome salesmen for us. And so even thinking about partnerships in that way, how can we reach out to the business owners within the communities that surround our national parks and bringing them in and saying, hey, you know, of course you know about the national park, but what did you know about all these other wonderful places that are around, because they can also be our ambassadors. And I think we really, really need to take a look at that. And that doesn't cost us anything. We could bring them in and do a, you know, whatever, a National Parks Communities 101 or public lands, whatever, and bring them in and introduce them to the assets, because most of the time, the people within these communities don't really know what's there. And so if we educate them and then we send them out, they can be great for us.
One thing I wanted to ask, we were talking about foreign travelers, and I have definitely seen in our park in the Smokies an increase in foreign travelers. My assumption is a lot of it has to do with the low dollar, the ability to spend more. When that, and or if the dollar rebounds strongly, how does that change the marketing to that crowd and that volume of people?
Well, it may change markets where you go and where you deploy your marketing campaigns based on the ability of that particular market to travel. But that's why research is important. And you know, when you think about a trip to the United States, in most countries it's a trip of a lifetime. But the good news is we have a lot of repeat visitors too. So, you know, there's the opportunity for those who have been to share with others about, you know, the great experiences that they can have. And when you're thinking about those trips, I mean, certainly dollar value goes into it. But even in the United States, when there was this recession, at the time, we chose not to cut back our marketing efforts. In fact, the Wyoming legislature invested another $2 million to our annual advertising budget to expand the Wyoming footprint. And so I think when you have times of change, that isn't always, the answer isn't always cut back and recede. It's about seizing an opportunity. And then I also wanted to expand on just our prior conversation. This has just about reaching people. Technology is our friend. The ability to reach out and touch potential consumers is so much more affordable today than it's ever been, because the channels of distribution for your marketing message have made it so much easier. You can be so much more targeted, and so the efficiencies in your marketing dollar that you're spending are only getting better. And so being a super intelligent group of marketers, we would have done the very best job possible with a highly efficient, highly impactful marketing campaign. Yes, please.
John, if I just can add to that, I think you need to follow the airlines and see where they are expanding international flights. We had finally our first direct flight from Salt Lake City to Paris. Now you can do the math and you can say, okay, 250 people 7 days a week. How did France shoot up from 7 to 4 in the total number of visitors in the state of Utah? Wasn't because of the direct flight. That number didn't impact it. But what we did was Delta had an investment in that flight being a success. And they had a ton of money about Utah in France. And we piggybacked onto that. And we said, all right, we want to talk to your sales agents. I'll fly over people to any place that Delta wants to do a direct flight to Salt Lake. I'll train your agents. And we also did a 300 travel agent blitz just before that flight was going on. So Delta was putting millions of dollars into France, and we just hopped on behind them. I think you watch where the business industry is going, and they can help you so much when you have limited dollars to spend.
Well, Leigh, that's a great example, and you led me to another question, which is about transportation, and I think all three of you can weigh in on this. Transportation has changed dramatically in the next 10 years, to and within the parks and in the surrounding communities. So tell us, how did transportation to and within the parks change, and what were the kinds of things that led to that?
Sending it my way?
Well, I'll send it anyway. You can talk about airline transportation.
What's my tape running?
Air transportation will work. Let's just start off.
Well, I think we are seeing an opening up of the skies because over the last 10 years with the Dreamliner coming on and the greater efficiency with planes themselves, they're able to get more people up in the air, more people around the world, and quicker. Hopefully, in the last 10 years, our friends at Amtrak have gotten a little bit of the love because I think we need more train travel and needed to encourage that. And I think we have to many times make a paradigm shift about using vans and shuttle and mobiles in parks. And the public has to be brought along. I remember one of the most popular canyons from downtown Salt Lake. The public went nuts when the Forest Service wanted to put $2 on a van to go up that canyon. Strong heads prevailed and made it happen. It's clean, it's neat, The picnic tables are new. It helped with the infrastructure. And anyone that's been to Maroon Bells knows what an experience that is in Colorado. My own park, Zion National Park. What a difference the new transportation made. So, yes, it's expensive. You need to get your local constituents and congressmen behind it, but we need to look at who's sitting on what committees and get to them and say, you can change the dynamics, certainly, of transportation and the experience in these parks that way.
In addition to group travel and including that, what we have enjoyed over the last 10 years is a change in just how consumers travel. And the American automobile industry is coming online. In the state of Wyoming, there are just a release out of the governor's office 2 days ago that there will be natural gas fleets purchased by the state of Wyoming, so that there will be alternative fuels and different ways in which the state of Wyoming will invest in automobiles to transport state workers around the state, and also a partnership with many of the communities across the state where you can actually go and get your gas tank filled with natural gas in your natural gas fueled car. So as we support the shift of the American public and the American automobile industry to look at more efficient ways of travel, the parks will only be the benefactor of that. And in this last 10 years, the great thing will have been that within the parks themselves, they're now set up to service this kind of new transportation that the American public utilizes.
And bikes. Bike lanes have got to be a part, pathways of bike lanes have got to be a part of the transportation and new plan. Yeah. And do what Paris did. You put your credit card in, you get a bike. You get to take it wherever you want. Put them at the front end of the parks and let them just rent what they need and ride around there.
I have to give a shout out to Grand Teton National Park for being one of the few parks, or maybe the only park in the United States that is completely has a pathway plan to connect the entire area through pathways into the community of Jackson Hole, and now looking at surrounding those the extension of the pathways into the forest and making an entire loop for visitors to enjoy. And so following that model, I think we'll see a lot of other parks where you can take a best practice of what's in place and look at it for implementation into other parks.
What I'd like to do now is ask you, for those of you who want to ask what's going on in the future, you can ask a question about how things have changed or whatever from this panelist. Or if you come from the future, you can, because our portal's right out there, it's those two telephone booths out there. If you come from the future, you can talk about a vision that you've seen in the future that and how it came to be. So I'll put that out to the audience, and please go ahead. Yeah.
How do you attract the difference between group tours and individual travel? When you do your marketing, is it different? Especially if you consider the baby boomers brain of America and retired.
Well, we have a strategy for package travel, as we call it now today, and that's a more direct approach because we're dealing, for the most part, directly with wholesalers and operators who are selling that for us. In the case of international, we're dealing a lot with receptive operators. So it's a very direct sales approach. To the leisure market, that has a much broader appeal, and and we have a strategy for markets that are further away, and a strategy for markets that are adjacent to Wyoming. And so when you're looking at markets further away, it's about building brand awareness and making the connection that the things that are iconic for Wyoming, that the consumer realizes that those things are actually in Wyoming. Highlighting our national parks, an example would be Yellowstone. A lot of people might think it's in Montana, and while we share those borders with Montana and Idaho, we're really claiming an awareness of that park and to the state of Wyoming. And so there is a strategy, and it's based on research and where we know, what kind of consumers we have coming to Wyoming and how we can best place our monies. Most state offices of tourism, with the exception of a few around the U.S., are funded with public dollars. And as in any organization, you have to be really prudent about how you're spending those, but we have to be able to show a return on investment and the fact that the marketing dollars are actually working. And again, research.
Exactly, and we have the same strategy, and I think looking over 10 years that in 2012 there was a study that said that the next generation of travelers was looking for something more than just the look and lead, because their parents took them to the national parks. They were looking for places where they could make a contribution and have adventure. We need to look at how we capture those groups for service projects, for improving things in our national parks, and really bring them online so that we're on their bucket list, not just for seeing, but for experiencing.
And actually, Joe, this change occurred about 12 years ago. I'm up in 2022. But what happened was there was a change in the way the group structure was occurring. From groups that would assemble to go see in place to groups that would assemble with like interest. They might be hikers or cyclists or whatever. So it was a difference in the nature of the group. And that now, 10 years hence, the baby boom is almost fully retired at this point. And they're all traveling because of like interest, and they're traveling with friends. And so those two changes, like interest and friends travel, have dramatically changed group travel. Another question? Yes?
So this dream is a beautiful dream, and what are the three biggest things that the Park Service did? Three most important things the Park Service did to make this vision a reality?
Was it the chief marketing officer that they hired?
I will offer one idea. It built community. It built community among the Park Service workers internally. It built community with its suppliers and service providers like concessionaires and other industrial, the guy who picks up the trash. It built community with the gateway communities. It built community with the foundations and the organizations, so that there's a term in the future called one park, one community. And that's used regularly because people believe in not being little towers, but being in a fortress connected by walls of individual specialties that have one community toward one purpose: preservation, promotion, and use.
And I think that's community is important back. National parks need to reach back. I'll take my own hit on this. We need to reach more to the specific people in the national park who are working. A hospitality consistency, a messaging consistency. I speak to county commissions. I don't always do a good job of speaking to my national parks people, so that I'm not seen as a threat. That was one of the things that I did a lot of when we had filming on public lands issues. The ability to talk about what my vision was for filming on the public lands in Utah, and that I wasn't seen as someone that was just going to bring in any crew to run roughshod over our public lands for the sake of a movie. And to explain the industry I was dealing with. But, you know, that's a sliver of the motion picture industry and working a problem like that out. But I think your people should not be intimidated by us sitting at the Capitol and doing our promoting thing. We need to understand what your problems are and how you're working through different problems so that we can understand, and I can go back to my board that makes the decision on where the money's spent. Let's take, instead of 15% for the shoulder season in our marketing and promotion this year, and make it 20. And let's, and also the other thing is, we're trying to do a better job at what you are talking about. When we partnered with Bryce Canyon on their Night Skies program, it pushed our messaging tremendously because it was a unique thing and it was different and we could pick it up in all our national parks, and it was something that our research told us people in other countries were loving. Hey, Bryce is doing this. Let's go talk to them. So we need to talk better about the great things that you're doing in the national parks and have a comprehensive understanding of all the, Bill, getting back to your thing, what do you do when the dollar stabilizes and the different? You go for value added. You have the best value added from an educational standpoint, from an experience standpoint, and sometimes we don't know all of it that's occurring. And we both, I take responsibility to know better on that.
I think the other thing that you have miraculously done, congratulations, is you have found a way to get through the bureaucracy to be able to be more responsive in a much more expeditious way. And you know, I think that's where you may understand what a consumer wants or what a partnership may need, but because you, in the past, you were mired down with, you know, bureaucracies and permitting and rules and regulations, and today we found a much more streamlined approach to address those so that you can be much more responsive. I want to just one example on that. On this Yellowstone study that we did, I went to Superintendent Wink and asked him, you know, would you embrace this? Are you interested in it? He was like, I'm very interested in it. And he said, but Diane, you're gonna have to go through O&B. This is gonna take you, you know, a year, 2 years to even get the approval process to be done. But because we had a great superintendent who really wanted to help with this, he got us in touch with some other people within the Park Service that worked for him on his staff. And because we weren't using, you know, some of the park resources, we were able to get around that, and we were able to push the permitting through with his approval and his assistance to be able to get something done, from a March conversation to having people on the ground in Yellowstone the 1st of June. And so that kind of thing, if we could have, you know, the cooperations that were that kind of example across the board to have some good results, would be good. So congratulations on getting it done. Yeah. I'm impressed.
Yeah. Other, yes?
So I just got back from the NPPC conference in 2032.
Oh.
And it was at Craters of the Moon National Monument. Not the one in Idaho, the one on the moon. And I can tell you, the panelists haven't aged a day.
You don't age in the future. You don't age in the future.
Flattery is a good thing.
I took the Delta shuttle there. And I want to harken back to Leigh's comment about working with the airlines to promote a flight and promote Utah tourism. What's happened in the coming years, and what is it going to take to crack that code that Delta seemed to have done in the future and is starting to do with Utah, so that corporations can be engaged in a sensitive way from a tourism perspective to help increase the visitation and the experience in the parks? And maybe you could cite a couple of examples of projects that were collaborative with companies like the project with Delta that might help inform the coming years.
How was the moon?
The moon was great.
Are you having jet lag and you can't respond?
Yes, I have such jet lag. I absolutely.
You have moon lag.
You know, I think all of the transportation partners we need to work closer with. I mean, I think one of the and this isn't air travel to the moon or anything, but one of the great automobiles is Subaru. And you buy a Subaru, you automatically start getting their magazine. And they do a scenic byway or a park to visit, or, you know, how to be a good traveler, how to use your Subaru, but it's working with them to get the messaging out. They have a $60 million budget for France. I have part of a budget for France. And so I think we need to stay with where they are going, and we need to be on board when they open up new frontiers, like the moon, and make sure that our messaging is going with them. Any way we can be branded. You know, the Department of Defense always did a wonderful thing in terms of national parks, and that is if a ship was named after a state, you could brand the room that they, and all of the motif. New Mexico just did this with fabulous. It was all motif for the New Mexico, and I can't remember if it was a destroyer or what it was. But I walked on board and I thought, my goodness, they even had a little kiva that they built in a corner free space on there. So there is an opportunity, not just with Sky Magazine, but also with hearing where they're going and how they're going, and we need to jump on board with that. that answer your question. If not, I really need a cup of coffee.
You know, I served on the USS Fresno, and unfortunately, they just had raisins for us. So.
Oh, shoot. But they were dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of, I don't know where I am. I think I'm in the present.
We don't know where we are either.
Going back and forth. What time zone is the moon in? How would you change the product that we're offering to meet the demands of the changing society?
You know, I think it was addressed yesterday, really probably more so in the technology session than any other place. And I think the product itself hopefully doesn't change, because I love the product. I mean, you know, you look out here and even a picture doesn't capture that.
I'm talking about commercial product, excuse me. I don't want to fill this in with water. How would you change the product that NPHA serves right now? So what's the demand changing? Because you talk about how the groups are changing and visitor patterns are changing. So how do we change the products? What goods and services do we need to provide going forward?
Well, Diane has said this repeatedly. I think we need to embrace technology. I mean, I'm looking at having these in my welcome centers and loading them with apps, and then when someone comes in and saying, oh, you're a hiker or a golfer, do you have an iPhone? Let me send you that app so you can find out. So people are coming, oh, you know, I walked around myself looking for a map, and I have a fear of heights. God love it out there. It's just gorgeous. Can't look at it enough. But I want to exercise, and I want an alternative path to going where everybody else was going, and I hope they had fun. And I struggled with finding an alternative place for me to do 3 to 5 miles. Where was the information? So I think the more you can get things out about where your information is, that's the product. I mean, granted, you have really gone out of your way to make the eating experience here amazing. But getting back to that, I mean, I've learned so much being with all of you. We did a culinary tourism trip to New York in May. And it was on local first eating in Utah Zone and all that kind of stuff. Had I known about my friend Tom from Bryce cooking the way he's cooking at that lodge, and what other lodges are doing, man, it would have been at the top of the list of what I was marketing for culinary tourism. So, information.
And I just added to that, the idea, it's almost like a secret. So we've got to stop letting it be a secret. We've got to really put it out there to the masses, because again, we've got to appeal to people on a lot of different levels. You know, someone may not necessarily, if they have a fear of heights, they may not necessarily come here to go and take a look at the Grand Canyon, but God, I love food. I'm from Louisiana. So if you have any food, I'm going where the food is. I mean, if it's good food, I'm so there. So I think, you know, in terms of really kind of putting the message out there, because you can have an awesome, awesome message, and you can have this great strategy for getting the message out, but if you're not getting it out to, you know, they're going to come regardless, but if you're not getting the message out to the other folks, it doesn't really help in even having the message. And I learned that in doing disaster work, believe it or not. When I was working with FEMA, we had all this information that was crucial for people if they were going to get their lives restarted, but we were just putting it out in one venue, and we thought we put it out there. You know, but we don't understand why they're not coming. But then we discovered that we weren't putting it in the right places to get the results that we needed. So I think let's not keep it as a secret, because that's something Leigh should have known, and we should have done something to put the message out there, because the fact is that when Leigh goes out, she has the national park there, she's going to sell it because it's there. So why not, you know, give her the tools that she needs to better sell what it is that she's selling. And so I think that that's a really crucial part to that partnership, is that, you know, when the national parks do well, the states do well, and vice versa. So we need to work in tandem, and we need to work together to give them the information, because they have more money than we have, and we can't do the marketing and the advertising like they can do it. They're the subject matter experts, but then let's give them the information that they need in order to do that.
I think also as concessionaires, you have to be ready to engage with an influx of travelers that we'd not have traditionally seen visiting our national parks. I'm speaking predominantly of the Asian market and Chinese. You know, their culture is very different. Their styles of what they enjoy, even just the ability to communicate and having things, you know, geared to be able to be receptive and welcoming. It's a challenge that you have, and it's a challenge that we as marketers have as well, is to really get ready for a new wave of visitors.
Okay, John.
You're 10 years in advance. That's the panel. Kevin Kelly asked a question about what should the product be like in 10 years. I want to add on to that question. What are the amenities? What should the amenities be like? We know the park is, the views and everything else is very important, why people come. But when they get into the park and they have their sleeping quarters or their restaurants, what should these amenities be like? Should they be like they are 10 years ago? Or should they be like people expect 10 years from now?
One change that's happened, Joe, is that we look critically at not imposing a certain way of visiting on the guest. We protect the park, but at the same time, the facilities in the future are more in line with what the public expects of any place they're going to go. Is it going to be an excellent bed? Is the bathroom going to be large enough? Is it going to have a locking door? You know, some cabins and so forth don't have those things. So those things have been corrected. You know, better beds, better restrooms in the rooms, more fitting the way people. So what did that involve? It's what Diane and Leigh talked about, and Gail, is research helped guide what was delivered in accommodations. Research told us what the public really was looking for. And we weren't so saying, well, we got to have this cabin always this way. We said, no, maybe it's time for that cabin to change. You know, and let's preserve its historic character, but do it in a way that fits the way people want to travel.
And you also have to be able to communicate for a realistic expectation. So if what is delivered is a rustic cabin, that has to be what's in the message. So that, and there are many people who would enjoy that. They just want to know. They don't want to be surprised when they arrive and they're expecting a certain level of amenities. So I'm, you know, in the spirit of hospitality and what all of you are facing, I think it's not only the research that guides you for what you need to invest in, but how you shape that message, and you work with those of us who are helping sell your product as well by driving visitors to your sites. And just let's be realistic about what we're saying is going to be there. And you know, as marketers, you can make anything, you know, I mean, and it is, when I say it's appealing, and I don't mean that in a false way, but there is an appeal, and there are certain people who will align with different levels of amenities.
And I think the authentic.
Yes.
The authentic is going to remain to the future, 10, 20.
Further and further away from it.
But also, the different experience. If it's rustic, it's rustic. No going in. Glamping. Can you add glamping to it as a part of the equation? Dwell and lead certified. And if any of you have not seen a website called Running Huts, take a look at the Running Huts lodging and how it is just put down on the, you know, no interruption, just put down on the property, how it incorporates what's surrounding it. I was pleasantly surprised with the soap and the moisturizer that I found in my room here. It was great. It's like I was looking for natural I never expected to see the natural alloy products that were in the room. A lot of people like the sheets, you know, I couldn't have been more comfortable. But then I also laid there and thought about all the times my parents and I went to national parks and we were in those cabins. So there was the authentic, and yet the creature comfort was met too. Yay, good shampoo!
10 years from now, what's happened with concession specialists is they've now tended to look at what is it people are using and not using. And those things that they're not using, they then look at, why aren't they using it? Because the concession specialist wants the American public engaged in the park. So they look at what's not being used and they say, is it relevant anymore? And so then they work with the concessionaire to find, okay, how can we make that facility more relevant? So if they have an overabundance of single campgrounds, but an underabundance of group campgrounds, they make that shift. Or if they have little cabins without bath, and nobody's renting those, but the cabins with bath, go immediately. They try and figure out, how do we make that shift? Do we reduce the number of cabins and increase the ones with bath? What is it we do? And so what they're doing is the concession specialists have changed dramatically. They're not just looking at rules and regulating and how do I make sure it meets this manner. They're more engaged in how the visitor experience is occurring and what concession operation should be there to serve the visitor. And that's a big change, because what it's done is now, it said the Park Service cares about us when we visit, because they've now bring in facilities that really fit the way we want to visit.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I can't wait 10 years or 5 years, or I'm not going to do it now here. And if we don't start reversing national park visitation trends, I might not even be here next year. So, along with probably some of the others in the room. But anyway, my question is relative to visitation. I mean, you've sat here and you've heard a lot of very passionate people talk about this subject. And my question to each of you is, sitting in our shoes, whether you're with the National Park Service or whether you're a concessioner, and again, with your experience as being an international marketer, so, what is the one thing we can do to immediately impact this trend, this visitation trend? What is the one thing we could do either as a group or individually to do that? Now, this is a softball question, so.
I'll put it to the panelists, but also to everyone out there. Okay, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I applaud you for doing what you're doing right now, because coming together and having destination marketers here with you to talk about how we can enhance our partnership, I think is a big step in the right direction. I applaud the Park Service for being here in the room and having a call to action that has a lot of the things that are important for the tourism economy of a state, of a region, and of a nation as part of their call to action for 2016. I just believe that there's so many more ways in which we can elevate our partnerships and reduce our redundancies. And there are, it's not going to start with everyone having 100% achieve success. But if we could take 2, 3, 10 parks, park units, concessionaires working with gateway communities and a state and a region, as here are some things that we want to do to elevate visitation. We know these are our challenges. We know from because there's so much research that's already out there. That doesn't have to be, you don't have to reinvest in it. Let's take what we know. A lot of us from gateway communities to states, we already have this vast list of consumers. You, as a concessionaire, have a vast list of consumers and of users. So we already have this audience who have experienced the product and can give us feedback. And most of them are advocates, and they're willing to share, and they want to see this product continue to grow and develop. So that's what my suggestion is. Let's seize the moment. Carpe diem, seize the day. Let's take advantage of the momentum that we have, and let's sit down and see how we can elevate some of these partnerships. I think we have in Wyoming. I feel really fortunate. We have a great program in place. We have a great relationship with our concessionaires who are providing service, and I think our model is good. Is it perfect? No. We're always looking at ways to improve it. But I think the door is open from Leigh and our colleagues across the United States are more than willing to engage in the same kind of conversation and do the same kind of work.
And I'd just like to add that now is the time. I don't think that there has been a better time for us to do that. So we definitely have to seize the day, because we're not quite sure how long the day is going to last. So really now is the time, and the door is open, and I think, again, the National Tourism Strategy, I can't stress that enough. If you're not familiar with it, you need to get familiar with it. It's the first that this country's had, and so it's really where the federal government government is looking at this in a different way, and for the first time, or the first time in a very long time, we all are coming together to the table. We all are working together, not just, you know, one time, let's get together, talk about this, now we have the strategy, so we're done. But this is something that's ongoing, that we're consistently engaging in. Since the National Tourism Strategy has been rolled out, we've formed working teams across the federal government, and we meet on a monthly basis to talk about issues, to help to work out issues. We're constantly in contact with our states and our state tourism directors, trying to figure out how to make this work. So I think that, you know, if we're going to move, and again, just like Tom Kiernan said, we're at this crossroads. Now's the time, and if we're going to make a move, it's now. And we don't want to let that time slip away, because it's going to be very hard to redeem it if we do. So I say, again, take advantage of the partnerships. These are great, great people, and they're willing to do whatever to help, because they understand that when our parks are doing well, their states are going to do well, our cities are going to do well, and we all will do well. So I say, be more open to what they are offering, and make sure that you get those solid partnerships, because the time to form the relationships is not when we're in a crisis. So now is the time.
And I'd like to compliment Derek and all the work that he's done in pulling this together. I was unable to make the one in January. I heard great feedback. The mayor from Moab came back so energized to work with partners and to work with you. I'm energized coming out of this, you know, with this discussion that we've had. I think we need to keep doing that. We have a tremendous leader in Gail and her boss and John, and they're getting to us. Sometimes you operate in a silo. You hold these things and you don't get the people that count. We've had the people that count here. So kudos to Gail and kudos to John Jarvis for coming together. But I think we need to continue to do this. And if we can really structure a bang-up 2016, I think we can sweep more people along with us.
Okay, Pam?
Just a quick question. 2012, I'm not 10 years ahead. How does this energy that everybody feels in this room get back to our local regions and to our superintendents? Does the Park Service do some sort of a summary of this event, or will they? So our superintendent and way up there in Northern California knows what's happening?
Individually, we can all communicate back. Organizations like the NPPC will definitely communicate back. But individually, we should all communicate within our companies, within our states, within our communities, within the National Park Service, within our individual parks, within our foundations and associations and so on, is to talk this message and to get people to understand that we have to change, and that we've got a plan to change, and that we have a call to action. And so we can't just let it be the book of the month that sits on a shelf. It's got to be actively read and done and instituted.